3 days before the limo arrived, Renee had exactly $11 in her checking account. That was the whole of it. Not 1,100. Not 11,000. $11 counted against the overdraft she had been avoiding looking at since Tuesday. She knew the number by heart because she had checked it at 2 in the morning while her daughter slept, holding the phone under the sheet so the light wouldn't wake the child up. She had stared at it for a long time, running a kind of arithmetic that wasn't really about math. $11 between her and nothing. Between her and the eviction notice already taped to the door. Peaked. Between Destiny getting new shoes and Destiny going to school in the ones held together with 2 loops of electrical tape, she had applied herself in the parking lot of the school, one afternoon 3 weeks ago, hoping no other parents saw her kneeling in the gravel. She had been working at May's Kitchen for 9 years. 9 years of 6-day weeks and double shifts and a right wrist that ached every winter from the angle of the coffee pot. 9 years of Christmas Eve tables and New Year's Day rushes, and the smell of maple syrup worked so deep into the weave of her uniform that she could not entirely wash it out anymore. She was 34 years old, and she looked, on bad mornings, like 40 was coming for her early. She was not bitter about it. That is the thing about Renee, that people who only glanced at her could not have known. The tiredness was real. The $11 was real. Bitterness, though, requires a kind of inward turning that she simply had not gotten around to. She had a daughter who smelled like strawberry shampoo and laughed at everything. She had irregulars who said her name when they walked in, and meant it. She had her mother's recipe for sweet potato pie, folded in her wallet behind a school photo of Destiny. She counted these things the same way she counted the $11. They were both real. If you have ever watched a person carry something heavy for a long time and still find ways to set it down graciously when the moment requires, you know what kind of woman Renee was. Most days she was better at it than she had any right to be. It was a Wednesday morning, the slow stretch between the breakfast rush and the lunch crowd. When the man came in, he was not dressed like much. A grey zip-up jacket with a pull missing from the zipper, khaki work pants that had been through a wash cycle too many times, boots that were practical and nothing more. He was probably 60, maybe a little past. Close-cropped silver hair, reading glasses hanging from the collar of his jacket. He had the unhurried way of moving that belongs to a man accustomed to making his own decisions about his own time. He sat at the counter, not at a booth, which at May's Kitchen usually meant a person was alone and preferred to stay that way. Renee came over without being called. She had learned to read the counter-sitters. This man wanted coffee, not conversation, and maybe a minute of quiet. "Just coffee, please," he said. His voice was low and even. The kind of voice that didn't need to carry far to be heard. Coming right," she said. She brought the mug, poured without rushing, left the creamer without being asked, because she had been doing this long enough to guess. He thanked her, and she left him to it. 3 minutes later, Hector, the cook, called her back through the pass-through. She went to check the morning orders, and when she came back around the counter to refill the man's cup, she noticed that Gerald, the regular in the third stool, was talking at him about the game from last night. Gerald was not unfriendly. Gerald was simply relentless in his enthusiasm and had a habit of choosing conversational partners who could not easily leave. The man in the grey jacket was nodding politely, holding his mug with both hands, looking like a person who had promised himself a quiet half-hour and was now recalculating. She refilled Gerald's coffee too, which had the effect of temporarily redirecting Gerald's attention toward thanking her at length, and the man in the grey jacket caught her eye for just a moment, and there was something in his expression that might have been gratitude. "You need anything else?" she asked him. "Just the check," he said. She went to run it. The coffee was $2.50. She rang it up, tore the ticket, brought it over. Then she stopped. She did not stop for any reason she could have named. Later, she would try to reconstruct the logic of it and fail to find one. He just looked like a man who had come in for something more than coffee and had not gotten whatever that was, and was going to leave without it. He looked in a way that had nothing to do with his clothing or his boots, like a man carrying something. She recognized the posture. She tore the ticket in two and put it in her apron pocket. "On me," she said. He looked up. "You don't need to do that," he said. "I know," she said. "Coffee's on me." He held her gaze for a second longer than was required. Then he nodded once. "Thank you," he said. "What's your name?" "Renee," she said. He said his name was Walter. He finished his coffee, put on his jacket, and left $2.50 on the counter anyway, which she found after he was gone and almost called him back over it. She pocketed it instead and thought she might see him again sometime. The way you think about the counter-sitters who drift in and then don't come back for months. She did not know who Walter was. She had no idea at all. She thought about him for about 30 seconds after he left. Then the lunch rush started, and she thought about nothing but tables and tickets, and whether the number 4 booth couple needed more syrup. That was Wednesday. On Thursday, she came home to find a second notice under the first one. The management company had added a late fee of $95 to the amount she already could not pay. She sat at the kitchen table after Destiny went to bed and looked at the number and did the calculation she had been doing every night for 6 weeks. The math did not get better with repetition. The eviction proceeding would start in 11 days if she could not produce $1,540. She had $11. Her manager at Mays, a woman named Diane, who was not cruel and not generous, had told her twice already that there were no more advances. Renee had not asked a third time. She had her pride, and she kept it very carefully because it was one of the things she could not afford to replace. She called her sister in Cleveland that night and talked for 40 minutes without once mentioning the money. Her sister asked how things were, and she said, "Fine," and meant it as its own kind of prayer. After she hung up, she sat in the quiet kitchen for a while, listening to the sound of the street below and Destiny's breathing through the wall. And then she prayed too, the old words her mother had taught her, the ones that did not ask for anything specific but simply acknowledged that there were things outside the reach of arithmetic. She was not a person who performed her faith. She just had it, the way she had her mother's recipe in her wallet. Quietly, without showing it off. Friday morning she was back at Mays at 5:30. Before the sky had decided what it wanted to do, tying her apron strings in the employee lot while her breath made small clouds in the February air. She worked the breakfast rush alone because Tamika had called in. She did not complain about this. She stacked the plates, she poured the coffee. She remembered that the man at the window booth always wanted his eggs over medium and not over easy, even though he ordered over easy, and she got it right without him having to send them back. She made $17 in tips by 8 o'clock, which she folded carefully and put in the inside pocket of her jacket because she did not like the vulnerability of the apron pocket. She thought about what $17 meant in the context of $1,540. She thought about it for about 4 seconds, and then she went to bust the counter. This was a skill she had developed without trying to develop it, the ability to hold a difficult number in her mind, to know it precisely, and then to set it down at the edge of her awareness while she worked. Some people could not do this. She had seen people come undone by debt, consumed by it, unable to do the next small task because the weight of the large thing blocks the light. She had decided somewhere along the way, without formal decision, that she would not do that. The number would be there when she got back to it. The tables needed bussing. Now, she was good at this. She was good at the specific discipline of setting down what needed to be set down so that she could do what needed to be done. She had been doing it since Destiny was born. She had been doing it in some form since she was a girl, watching her father come home from the warehouse and wash his hands and sit down to whatever dinner was available without complaint and without drama. You did the next right thing. The arithmetic sorted itself out eventually, or it did not, and either way the next right thing was still the next right thing. She thought briefly of the coat in the plastic sleeve. She let the thought pass. She thought about what $17 meant in the context of $1,540 for the last time that morning, and then she went to bust the counter. Around 10 that morning, a woman she did not recognize came in and sat at the end of the counter and ordered tea, which Mays technically did not serve. Rennie boiled water in the back and found a box of chamomile that Diane kept for her own headaches and brought it out with a mug and a small white saucer, and the woman looked at her like she had brought her something rare. This was what Renee did, all day, every day, for 9 years. She found the thing that was wanted and brought it without making a scene of it. She did not need recognition for it. She did not expect recognition. She just did it the way she tied her apron strings, automatically, before anything else. The weekend passed. Renee worked both days. Her wrist ached on Saturday night. She soaked it in warm water in the kitchen sink while Destiny sat on the counter and told her about a book she was reading at school, something about a girl who could talk to animals, and Renee listened to every word and asked questions and thought, while she was doing it, that this was the thing she was working to protect. Not the apartment, not exactly this. Destiny on the counter talking about a book, unbothered, unclouded by the 11 days remaining on the notice on the door. She had not told her daughter. She was not going to tell her daughter. She was 34 years old and she would figure it out. Sunday night, she ran the numbers again. She had made $43 in tips across the weekend, which brought her total to about $54 against $1,540 she needed by the end of the following week. There were things she could sell. She had thought about this. Her mother's ring, which she wore on her right hand and which was probably worth $200 or $300. The television in the living room, though it was old enough that the offers on resale sites had not encouraged her. There was a coat her mother had bought her the last Christmas before she died, a good wool coat with a velvet collar that she kept in a plastic sleeve in the closet and never wore, because she could not bring herself to. She thought about that coat. She thought about what it might be worth and what it would cost to let it go. She was still thinking about the coat on Monday morning and about other things. She was thinking about the walk from the bus stop to Mays on bad winter mornings, when the wind came in from the north and worked its way through the jacket she wore, because the good wool coat stayed in its sleeve. She was thinking about the look on Destiny's face when Renee had told her, last spring, that they would not be going to see her aunt in Cleveland for spring break because the bus tickets were more than she could manage that month. Destiny had said, okay, in the way children say, okay, when they understand something has been decided, and asking further questions would only add weight to something already heavy. She had gone to her room and come back 15 minutes later and not mentioned it again. And Renee had sat with that small moment for days afterward. The weight of what you carry is never really your own weight. That is what nobody who has not done it understands. You carry it on behalf of the people who would carry it themselves if they were old enough, and the heaviness of that is a different kind of heavy than ordinary hardship. She had not broken. She wanted that on the record, even if the only record was the one she kept herself. 9 years, 6 days a week, the wrist and the maple syrup and the $11, she had not broken. But there is a distance between unbroken and whole. And she had been living in that distance for a while. She prayed again before she went to bed, not asking for $1,540, asking to be useful for whatever was coming next. That was all she knew how to ask for, and she had found over the years that it was usually enough. She was still thinking about it on Monday morning when she drove to Mays in the dark. She parked in the employee lot at 5:25 and sat in the car for a moment before going in, doing what she had gotten, in the habit of doing each morning. A brief accounting of gratitude. The car started. The heat worked. She had a job. Destiny had her reading book. These things were true. She went inside, tied on her apron, and started the coffee. The breakfast rush on Monday was modest. February Mondays had a particular quality at Mays, a kind of mutual exhaustion between the staff and the customers. Nobody fully committed to the week yet. She moved through it steadily. By 9 she was refilling the sugar caddies and thinking about whether she had enough in her jacket to cover the bus pass she owed herself. At 9:47 she looked up at the sound of the door and saw the limo. Did not see it all at once. She saw it the way you notice something that doesn't belong, a peripheral register of something too long and too dark for the Mays kitchen parking lot. She finished, writing down the order she was taking, then walked toward the window on her way back to the pass-through, and there it was. A black Lincoln Town car, stretch model, parked alongside the curb outside the diner, with its hazard lights not on because the driver clearly did not expect to wait. She stood at the window for a second. She thought for a practical moment that it was a wedding party needing breakfast, which happened occasionally in a city where people started celebrations early. Then she looked again and saw that the driver was out of the car, standing beside it, waiting. And he was looking at May's kitchen, specifically, not at the street, not at his phone, at the diner. Moment later, he came in. He was young, and he wore a dark jacket, and he had the contained manner of a person accustomed to carrying messages on behalf of other people. "I'm looking for Renee," he said to Diane, who happened to be nearest the door. Diane turned and looked at Renee across the diner with an expression that contained several questions at once. Renee set down the coffee pot she was holding and crossed the floor. She was aware in the back of her mind that the 3 customers currently in the diner had all gone quiet. "I'm Renee," she said. The driver nodded. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced an envelope. White, sealed, her name written on the front in a handwriting she did not recognize. "Mr. Gaines asked me to deliver this," he said, "and to tell you that he would like to speak with you at your convenience, if you're willing." She took the envelope, she looked at it, then she looked at him. "Walter Gaines," she said, because the name had come back to her from Wednesday, without her intending to call it up. "Yes, ma'am," the driver said. She turned the envelope over once. She did not open it in front of the driver or the 3 customers or Diane, who was now standing very still near the register. "Tell him I'll come out," she said. She went to the break room and stood over the small table where she kept her jacket and her bag, and she opened the envelope there. Alone! She was aware, walking to the break room, of the quality of the silence behind her. She did not look back. Whatever was happening in May's kitchen in the next 3 minutes was happening without her, and Diane was competent, and the customers would keep, and the only thing that required her attention at this moment was the envelope in her hand. She was calm. She noted this with a kind of detached interest, that she was calm. She had been through enough mornings that held bad news in them that she had learned not to catastrophize ahead of the fact. Read the letter, then respond to what is actually in the letter. She had learned this too from watching her father, who had opened the notice about the warehouse closing on a Tuesday afternoon at the kitchen table and had read it twice, and then folded it and put it in the drawer beside the Bible, and finished his dinner. That was 12 years ago, and the memory was very clear. She was her father's daughter in more ways than the obvious ones. She opened the envelope. Inside was a single card, cream-coloured, with a note written by hand on the front in the same careful script as the name on the envelope. It said, "I apologize for the unannounced visit. You were kind to me last Wednesday when you had no reason to be, and I have been thinking about it since. I would like, if you are open to it, to return the kindness properly. I am aware you may find this strange. I hope you will give me 5 minutes. Walter." She read it twice, then she tucked it into her apron pocket, smoothed the front of her uniform, and went out to the parking lot. Walter was standing beside the car. He was dressed differently today. A dark coat, good leather shoes, a scarf that had the particular softness of something expensive. She might not have recognized him in these clothes if she had not already known his face. He looked like what he was. A man of means who had chosen, on a Wednesday morning, to come in without them. He saw her and he stepped forward, not with the manner of someone presenting himself, but with the manner of someone who understood he had some explaining to do. "Miss Renee," he said, "thank you for coming out." "I've got about 8 minutes before the 11 o'clock regulars," she said. He smiled at that, briefly. "I'll be quick." He told her, then and briefly, is what he was. He ran a holding company, the Gaines Group, with investments across the city. Commercial real estate, a logistics firm, 2 restaurants of his own. He had come to May's kitchen on Wednesday morning because one of the restaurants had an interest in the building, and he had wanted to walk the block himself, and he had come in for coffee without particular intention. He said all of this plainly, without the kind of throat-clearing that men who want to impress tend to do. He had been having a very bad year. His wife, of 31 years, had died in September. He told Renee this the same way he had told her everything else, simply and without decoration. And she heard in the plainness of it how large the fact was, the way you can sometimes hear the weight of a thing in how carefully a person sets it down. She thought for just a moment about the grey zip-up jacket with the pull missing from the zipper, the khaki pants washed too many times. She had read those clothes as a man who dressed for function and did not think much about it. She understood them differently now. They were the clothes of a man who had simply stopped noticing. She had seen grief do that to people before. There was a regular she had served for 3 years, a quiet, retired man named Earl who had come in every Tuesday morning with his wife, and then one Tuesday had come in alone and sat at the booth by the window where she had always sat and ordered her preferred oatmeal and a black coffee for himself, and done this every Tuesday for 4 more months until he had found his way back to a different version of ordinary. Renee had never said a word about it. She had simply remembered the oatmeal. She understood that some griefs ask only that you be seen in them, not spoken to, about them. She had recognized this in Walter on Wednesday without knowing the shape of what he was carrying, which perhaps explained why she had done what she had done. You do not always need the particulars of a thing to understand its weight. He said he had been coming and going through the city since then in a kind of motion that was not quite life. That he had sat at her counter on Wednesday expecting nothing, and that she had found him there and done what she had done, and that it had cost her something to do it. He could see that, and that it had stayed with him. He had asked the staff at Mays about her, he told her, not her private details, just whether she had worked there long. Diane had told him 9 years. He said that told him what he needed to know. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and produced a second envelope. He held it out. "I spoke with the management company for your building yesterday," he said. "The amount owing through the end of April is settled. There is a receipt in here." She went very still. He continued unhurried. "There is also a check for 6 months' pay at the wage I use for floor managers in my restaurants. I don't know what you make here. I know what this kind of work is worth, and I know it's not what you're paid. The check is yours regardless of what you decide next. If you have no interest in the position I am about to describe, keep the check, and I apologize for the intrusion." Renee looked at the envelope in his hand. Her eyes were dry. She was aware of them being dry and was aware that this could change at any moment. "What position?" she said. "I'm opening a 3rd restaurant," he said, "on Clement Street. I have a chef, and I have a kitchen, and I have no one to run the floor. Who knows what they're doing? 9 years at Mays tells me you know what you're doing." He paused. "My wife would have known to hire you already," he said. "She was better at this than I am." Renee was quiet for a moment. A car went by on the street. Somewhere behind her she could hear the diner's door and Diane moving chairs. "I'm a waitress," Renee said. "I don't have a manager's title. I don't have a degree in anything." "I know that," Walter said. "I don't care about that." "Why not?" "Because I watched you," he said. "When you brought out that tea for the woman who came in on Friday, that was not a small thing. You made it look like nothing, and it was not nothing. She had not known he was there on Friday. She had not looked up. She had no idea he had come back. She took the envelope from him. She held it at her side without opening it. "I need to think about it," she said. "Of course," he said. "The check I'll take," she said, "because you're right that what I make isn't what the work is worth." "It's not," he agreed. She looked at him for a second. "How are you doing?" she said. "Since September." He was quiet for a moment. The question had landed differently than she'd intended, or maybe exactly as she'd intended. She was not sure. "Some days better than others," he said. "That's the right answer," she said. "That's the honest one." He nodded once. In the way she remembered from Wednesday. "I'll let you get back," he said. "The number is in the envelope." She thanked him. She walked back inside. She went to the break room again and sat for 30 seconds on the chair beside the small table with the envelope in her hands, and she breathed. Then she got up and went out and tied on her apron and started pouring coffee. She called Walter Gaines from her car that evening, parked outside her building, Destiny upstairs doing homework and not knowing about any of it. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. She asked 6 questions, all of them practical. He answered them the same way. She told him she would give him an answer by Friday, and he said that was fine and thanked her again for the coffee. She sat in the car for a while after she hung up. The eviction notice was still on the door when she went upstairs, but she took it down this time and folded it into the recycling without ceremony, and Destiny did not see her do it. She cooked dinner. She helped Destiny with a worksheet about fractions. They watched part of a nature documentary because Destiny was going through a phase of wanting to understand how rivers worked. Renee sat on the couch with her daughter's feet in her lap and the documentary playing and a cup of tea cooling on the end table, and she felt, for the first time in a long time, the particular kind of quiet that is not the absence of trouble but the sense of having passed through it. She had not yet said yes to Walter. She had not yet worked out all of what it meant. There were things to think through. She would think through them. But she knew, sitting there with Destiny's feet in her lap and the sound of the river documentary filling the room, that she was going to say yes. She knew the way you know things that have already been decided somewhere just below the level of thought. She had paid for a cup of coffee. That was all she had done. She had noticed a man who looked like he needed the gesture more than she needed the $2.50, and she had done the small human thing, and it had cost her an amount she could measure exactly in the context of a life where every amount was measured exactly. She did not believe in coincidence the way some people leaned on it. She believed in the ledger that keeps itself, the one you cannot audit but whose accounting is always eventually correct. She called her mother's memory to mind the way she sometimes did. Her mother at the kitchen table, the sweet potato pie in the oven, the old words on her lips. What you give away is never gone. She had heard this her whole life without treating it as anything more than a comfort, the way most comforts are more than they announce themselves to be. She said yes to Walter on Thursday. She did not wait until Friday. She told Destiny that night, sitting at the kitchen table over dinner, that something had happened and things were going to be a little different and a little better. Destiny listened with the still attention she brought to things she understood were important. "Better how?" she said. "Different job," Renee said. "Better pay a restaurant I'll be running the floor for." Destiny thought about this. She was 9 and practical in the way. Practical mothers produce practical children. "Do you still have to wear an apron?" she said. "Probably sometimes," Renee said. "Okay," Destiny said, and went back to her rice. That was all. The child ate her dinner and Renee watched her eat it, and the kitchen was warm, and the evening was just an evening, no different from any other on the surface of it, and entirely different underneath. The Clement Street restaurant, which was called Harvest, opened on the 1st of May. Renee ran the floor from day one. She kept her section of it the way she had kept May's counter, with the specific attention of someone who understood that a room full of people eating is not a room full of customers. It is a room full of days, some of them good and some of them not, and the small mercies of a graceful meal can change the character of both. There were things to learn about management that she had not known, forms and schedules, and the particular art of telling someone they have done something wrong in a way that does not make them feel small. She learned them with the same patience she had brought to everything else. She was a quick study because she had been learning the same lesson in different registers for 9 years. Pay attention. Do the next right thing. Trust that the ground under you is more solid than it appears. Walter had told her before she left the parking lot that the floor manager position would pay 3 times what she made at May's. She had not reacted to this outwardly. She had absorbed it the way you absorb something that recalibrates the mathematics of everything, without yet knowing which number will change first. She thought about Diane when she walked back into May's kitchen that morning. Diane, who had hired her 9 years ago when she was 25 and desperate and had a 14-month-old at home, who had given her the full-time section when Maria quit, who had stood beside the register at every Christmas with a card containing $50 and had never once mentioned it afterward. She owed Diane a conversation, not a disappearance. She owed her the consideration of time. She waited 3 weeks after she said yes to Walter before she told Diane. She did it on a Friday afternoon when the lunch crowd had thinned and the diner had that particular quiet that comes after the rush. She sat across from Diane in the back booth and told her plainly that an opportunity had come, and she was going to take it, and she wanted to give 4 weeks' notice, because that was the right thing. Diane looked at her for a moment. Then she said, "Was it the man with the limo?" Renee said, "Yes." Diane said, "Well." And then she said, "He left $40 on the counter the second time he came in. I thought that was a man who was used to doing things right." They sat in the quiet for a moment, then Diane got up and went back to the register, and that was that. No drama, because there was nothing dramatic in it. Just a woman who had given 9 years and a woman who had received them, settling accounts without ceremony. Renee worked her 4 weeks. She trained the new girl on the counter. She showed her the man by the window who always wanted over medium regardless of what he ordered, and she showed her how to bring the chamomile when someone asked for tea without being asked. And she showed her where the afternoon light came through the east window in late March and made a spot near booth 4 that the customers liked if you could guide them there. Small things. Things that take years to learn and minutes to pass on if you are paying the right kind of attention. She cried a little in the car on her last day. Not for long. It was real, the way all true endings are real, even when you have chosen them yourself. Destiny got new shoes in March, not from a resale site. The real kind from the real store, the one she had mentioned 4 times and then stopped mentioning because she understood at some level that mentioning things had a kind of cost. Rennie put them in a box and set them on the kitchen table on a regular Tuesday morning, and Destiny opened the box and looked at the shoes, and then looked at her mother and said nothing for a moment, which was unusual. Then she said, "Are these mine?" "They are absolutely yours," Renee said. Destiny put them on immediately, still in her pajamas, and walked from the kitchen to the living room and back 3 times. Renee watched her and felt the pressure behind her eyes that she had not let herself feel in the parking lot of May's kitchen, or in the break room with the envelope, or in the car outside the building. She let herself feel it now, quietly in the kitchen with the coffee still brewing, just for a moment. The coat she had kept in the plastic sleeve, her mother's coat with the velvet collar, she took it out in April and wore it to the first walk-through of the harvest space, and it fit her the way. Good things always fit when you finally let yourself have them. She saw Walter twice a month at harvest, sometimes more. He came in on weekend evenings and sat at the bar near the window, not the counter. He was beginning, she thought, to look a little less like a man in motion and a little more like a man who had found a direction. She did not ask him about it directly. She just brought him his coffee without being asked and left the creamer and let him be. He always said, "Thank you," and he always meant it, and she always knew he did. The last time she had counted her checking account balance at 2 in the morning, staring at it under the sheet, had been 11 days before the limo parked outside May's kitchen. She thought about that number occasionally, not with bitterness, not with the dramatic shape of a before and after. She thought about it the way you think about the weight you used to carry, not because you've forgotten it, but because it clarified something. It confirmed what you had always privately believed. The world keeps its own ledger. You do not always see the entries being made. You do not always know whose account is affected by the small faithful thing you did on a slow Wednesday morning, because it seemed in that moment like the human thing to do. He had given a man a cup of coffee. Everything after that was the ledger catching up. Destiny was asleep now on a May evening, with new shoes by her bed and a library book open on her chest, and outside the window the city was doing its evening thing, the particular music of a neighborhood settling into night. Renee sat at the kitchen table with her mother's recipe folded in her wallet and her tea cooling in the way it always cooled. Because she always got distracted before she could drink it all, she said the old words quietly, not asking for anything, just acknowledging that the accounting was beyond her. She thought about the $2.50 Walter had left on the counter even after she had told him it was on her. She had pocketed it. It had gone into the tip envelope with everything else that shift. It had fed, in some small decimal way, the arithmetic that eventually got Destiny to school that week. She liked this about the way things worked. Nothing was truly lost. The circles were smaller than you could see and larger than you expected, and they closed in their own time. Then she got up, covered Destiny's book with the blanket, turned off the light, and went to bed. If you have ever held on to something quietly through the long stretch where nothing seemed to be returning, you know what this story is really about. Drop a comment below and tell me about the small moments someone's kindness changed the shape of your day. Anders. And if you are looking for another story about what happens when the world finally catches up to a good person who deserved it, there is one waiting for you when this one ends. This story is a work of fiction. All names, characters, and events are imaginary.